Good afternoon from Helsinki and welcome to the webcast of the Nordic Investment Bank. My name is Jukka Ahonen, I am the Head of Communications. We have published our annual results this morning and there are no surprises. The results are financially very strong. The annual profit is 211 million euro, out of which 55 million euro is proposed to be paid as dividends to our owner countries, which are the Nordic and the Baltic countries. Strong financials are of course important. However, as an international financial institution, we are guided by the purpose, by our mission. We are here to finance projects which are helping the region. That's why in this short briefing we focus less on financials and a little bit more on our main activities, which are lending and funding. First, NIB's Head of Lending, Wrangdahl, will give an overview how the lending developed last year. After that, our Head of Treasury, Lars Eibeholm, will give an update on our NIB Environmental Bonds. And we welcome your questions throughout this webcast. There is a box on the screen, in the bottom of the screen, and via that box you can send us questions. Now I would like to invite Wrangdahl to give an overview of our lending activities. Thomas.
Thank you. Thank you, Jukka. Yeah, as Jukka indicated, the result was good and the lending had a very good year. We dispersed some 3.1 billion, that's over the target we set of 3 billion. And we did that on a balanced way in the sectors that we are working. We're working with energy and environment, infrastructure, transportation and telecom, and also industries and services and financial institutions where we work through other financial institutions and reach out to the SMEs. Now, to reach this 3.1 billion, we have to make a fair deal of loans. We made 55 of those. And we had set a separate target that a fair deal of that should be to new customers. And we were reaching that well, so we had over half of the loans to new customers. And that's important for us for many aspects. We want to reach out to new clients per se, but we also need a diversity of our portfolio. Now, we give long-term loans. That is probably no surprise to you as an audience. That's how we complement the markets, the other financial markets. And normally we can only do half of a project. And those projects needs to have a positive effect on the environment or the competitiveness, which is basically the productivity gains of the companies, but also of the society at large. We measure this very clearly. We have a very skilled group who measure how this environment and competitiveness aspects are fulfilled in our projects. And we measure how well we come up to the target. We had some 97 of all our loans that reached either excellent or good in one of those two categories. So we're satisfied with that. In addition to the loan business, we started last year actually also a new initiative, and that is to invest in green bonds. Of course, we finance ourselves with green bonds, and we're one of the more significant issuers. Lars will talk more about that in a while. But we also think it's important to be part of the market and see the green bond market develop from an investor point of view. And we did 9 of those issues in various countries. Maybe the most interesting for us was that the Baltic countries came up here, and we made the first green bond in Lithuania. So if we take those 55 loans that I talked about initially and we add the green bonds that we invested in, we totally signed a volume equivalent to 3.8 billion. We do those financing both to the public and to the private sector. Around 40% is in the public sector and then 60% is in the private. And I'd like to give you 2 examples of all those 55 loans that we did. And I've chosen to show you an example which is in the competitiveness mandate aspect because it's R&D, research and development, and that is with a bioscience company, which the name is Christian Hansen. And this company has, as many companies that are having research, they have to have lots of patents. Christian Hansen has some 2,000 patents, and they have some 40 new every year. When we evaluate the project of research and development, we look into how well the company is cooperating with universities and research centers, and we found that was definitely the case in this case. The other example I would like to give is in the environmental field, and here the example is in an area which is very keen for us and close to us, wastewater treatment plants. So we have many of those financed in the membership countries, but also in other countries, especially around the Baltic Sea. I think it's fair to say that NIB over the years has contributed to a cleaner sea and a cleaner Baltic Sea, and we will continue to do so. The example I have here is from Stockholm, from Wrangdahl, and that's a rather large loan that we had to this wastewater treatment plant, some 1.5 billion Swedish. And what's interesting with this, apart from it's big and important, is that they, in this project, are able to also discharge microplastic, which is, as you have heard, a bigger and bigger problem for our oceans. And we see this as an important new development for wastewater treatment plants. I just would like to finally brief you on some of the different initiatives that we especially work with. And of course, 3 of our member countries are the Baltic countries. The economies have developed very well there, but we want to try to take part and help that further. So we have a special initiative to lend to the Baltic economies, and we have targets on that, and we did very well on those targets last year. And the loans were mainly in the sector of energy and transportation, so to the public, mainly in the Baltics, but we hope also to develop loans into the private sector going forward to the Baltics. The other emphasis I'd like to put is on the type of, or the size of the companies in the private sector that we would normally lend to. I think if you look at NIB portfolio, you would see that a large portion of that is to large corps. Of course, we understand the increasing development of the mid-cap sector, and we put emphasis on that, and we have worked with that a couple of years, and I think we're making better and better inroads there to also provide our services and loans to the mid-cap sector. Last but not least, 4 of the countries have a large part of their area in the Arctic regions. This is an important part for the bank to be part of developing. We need to be careful. This is environmental sensitive areas, but we specifically try to see what we can do in this area and are lending specifically into this area with, as I mentioned, very careful considerations into the environmental aspect of those projects. Yeah, that's it for me, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. I think we have one question which we could take now, and that's from the Finnish Business Daily Kauppalehti, and the question is that how does the lending pipeline look for this year?
Oh, thank you. Well, it looks very strong, actually. You would understand that the loan in NIB could take from 3 months and up to 6 months, a year, depending on the complexity and the input. So we always measure the pipeline. The pipeline looks very strong, and that's based upon, of course, that the economies in our area is strong, and we see more and more investments, both in the private and the public sector.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. The other theme we have in this webcast is the NIB Environmental Bonds. And we have published recently a report on our activities, and you can find it on the website. Then I would just like to remind you that please send questions via this box on the screen. And now I would like to invite Lars Eibeholm, our Head of Treasury, to introduce our activities in the green bond market.
Thank you, Jukka, and I'll just start setting the scene in relation to the global green bond market, and the global green bond market actually experienced a huge growth in 2017, up with nearly 75 billion euros to approximately 125 billion euros, and that is a growth of approximately 70%. However, the Nordic region actually experienced an even stronger growth, and new issuance in 2017 almost doubled compared to 2016. I believe that the Nordics still play a leading role in the global green bond market, and the Nordics actually continue to maintain a substantial market share of the total green bond market. Last year, Nordic Investment Bank, we issued also record high amount of green bonds, in total 920 million euros, which you can see on the slide right now. And therefore, NIB is still the biggest issuer of green bonds in the Nordics, and we estimate that we have a market share of approximately 20%. During 2017, the money that we raised from these environmental bonds mainly went to green buildings. And that's actually very important because that's an area where a lot of energy savings are needed. But in this NIB report, we have also added a lot of other numbers. And one number is for wastewater treatment from one of the projects also Thomas just highlighted. And these numbers we have translated into a population equivalent. And that actually means that investors that have invested in NIB's environmental bonds has been facilitating wastewater treatment for almost 1 million people, and NIB's share of that is approximately half. All these information you can find in the NIB report, but also in the annual report, and I highly recommend our viewers, our listeners, to go in and enjoy the annual report for further information. I think I'll stop here.
Okay, thank you, Lars. There's one question from the Nordic Green to Scale project from Janne Peljo that's relating to the EU Commission action plan. Basically, EU Commission has just published the action plan how to promote these sustainable investments. And NIB has been part of that process. And he would like to know that how do you think that the proposals are going to affect the financial sector and our bank?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I'm extremely positive surprised that the EU Commission has decided to go ahead with so many of these experts groups' recommendations. There's an extremely tight timetable laid out in this action plan. I take that EU wants right now to strike when the iron is hot and utilize the very positive momentum that we experience right now. I believe it will create some kind of a foundation for change in the financial system. However, it will, of course, take time. The action plan is definitely not something that the financial sector and capital markets just can ignore. The most important actions for NIB, that is clearly the introduction of an EU taxonomy for how to define green, but also the upcoming EU standards for green bonds. We, as a consequence, however, not only due to the EU action plan, but we're actually in the process of updating our mandate framework. And I really hope that we could be able to publish that later in the spring. And here, of course, we will try to address some of the new developments and recommendations from the group. Further, during 2018, we will have to look into NIB's own framework for the environmental bonds and actually update that to align with the latest market developments.
We have some other questions. Maybe, Thomas, you can also come here. Seems to be that many of these questions are actually relating to the green bonds. There's one question from Jakob Michaelsen from Nordea. and it's a bit long, but I will read it. So, the green bond has seen a tremendous growth over the recent years, and during this period, NIB has been very active. And the question is what do you think that within the Green Bond Principles Executive Committee and around this developing world, what are the next relevant milestones?
Oh, thank you, Jacob. Reporting, I think, is a key theme in the green bond market. Impact reporting and more transparency and additional requirements in that relation coming from investors, stock exchanges, other stakeholders. A couple of years ago, NIB participating in developing reporting templates for renewable energy investments and also energy efficiency together with other financial institutions. And right now we're actually working in the context of the Green Bond Principles. As you mentioned, NIB is member of the Executive Committee. NIB's highly experienced mandate rating unit and also the funding team has participating in these working groups. And one of them has been around impact reporting. And this working group has made recommendations for sustainable water and water management. These templates was created last year. And this year's work has been concentrated around waste management and resource efficiency projects. And these templates are almost done. Further, I hope that we will be able to present recommendations for sustainable transport. Both templates for the waste management and also for the sustainable transport is expected to be published later this spring at the annual general meeting for the Green Bond Principles, actually in Hong Kong. So I hope that gives an answer to you, Jacob.
Okay, then we have one question which is a bit different. And I just want to remind you that if you have questions, please send them via the tool. Then I can read them here on my iPad in real time. This question is a little bit more on funding in general. There is a question about monetary policy and its impact on funding. The question is the following. The monetary policy is in the turning point in the Eurozone because of robust growth. And how does that influence the bank's funding?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I think I'll answer here in two areas because it actually has impact in two areas as I see it. On the transition towards higher yields, of course, we will experience further volatility in the market. Hence, it will also affect NIB's bonds issuance. However, we are in the very best quality of bonds with the AAA rating. So I think in that respect, the impact on our funding will be actually quite minimal. We will, of course, need to adjust to higher yields, and I think we are quite capable of doing that. The other area I want to address is actually on the income side, and NIB has a huge liquidity buffer, and here actually with higher yields we could experience positive impact. So the impact of higher yields is actually contributing positive to NIB's to NIB's earnings in my view.
All right, thank you very much, Lars. And I don't see any further questions here on my iPad, so thank you very much for joining for this short briefing session. Thank you.
Thank you.